Kanga Audio.
If you enjoy the stories on this podcast, you'll also like the stories in my book, Filmmaking Confidential, which isn't just for filmmakers, but also all artists and really any entrepreneur. Now an Amazon.com and Audible.com bestseller. I just want to say thank you to all of you who ordered it. If you haven't yet picked it up, it's available wherever books are sold in most countries around the world. To find out more, check out filmmakingconfidential.com and stevebalderson.com. And thank you. I'm Steve Balderson, and you're listening to the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. Every week we meet with filmmakers, writers, actors, artists, and other notables. Today, I'll continue reading from my book, Filmmaking Confidential. Marketing. You versus the big boys. For a single Hollywood movie studio, millions of dollars will be spent on advertising and marketing campaigns to make sure that everyone everywhere knows about the movie. It might seem outrageous, but really, they must spend that much to have a chance to recoup the massive and absurd costs of making said movie. For anyone spending less than $1 million on their movie, there is hardly any money to make a dent in the world of studio-sized marketing campaigns. You might be able to afford some kinds of advertising, but still, you will be faced with a huge Goliath standing in your way. Without tens of millions, you will be relegated to marketing your movie in a certain niche. Those of us who make movies for a fraction of that have even less. So what can we do to compete with the big boys? How can we get our movies talked about? How can we get people to see our movies? You do not need stars or money. You just need promotion. After all, people won't watch your movie if they don't know it's an option. But how can you do promotion with little or no money? By thinking outside the box. My dad, Clark, runs a construction equipment attachments manufacturing business called Dymax. To illustrate an example of how you can compete with the big boys, let's explore what Dymax achieved at Mine Expo in 2004. In the world of construction equipment attachments, Caterpillar and Komatsu reign like the movie studios Sony and Warner Brothers. For Mine Expo, Caterpillar and Komatsu each spent millions of dollars on their exhibits, which were enormous, maybe 10,000 square feet or more. Dymax had only $10,000 to spend, and their booth was maybe about 200 square feet. Clark asked himself, what can we do to stand out from the crowd? What can we do differently? Mine Expo was taking place in Las Vegas. What about something involving showmanship and an over-the-top spectacle? But Mine Expo is for miners, rough and tumble customers. After thinking outside the box, Clark created a Dymax sideshow featuring the Enigma, who swallowed swords, breathed fire, and stuck nails into his skull, Selene Luna performed striptease, and Pleasant Gaiman, as Princess Farhana, did belly dance and burlesque. The Dymax sideshow performed every 2 hours. The Enigma, Selene, and Pleasant walked around the exhibition floor, and many people took notice. Everyone who saw them felt the urge to come see them perform, find out what all that's about. Dymax had a steady stream of people stopping by to have their pictures taken with the performers. Most of all, the audiences enjoyed the performances. When it was all over, Clark discovered that the Mine Expo management had awarded Dymax 2 prizes for best marketing, out of a total of 7 prizes handed out to the entire expo. And it was done for a small percentage of what the big boys spent. Use this example as a lesson on how to stand out, create your own buzz, and how to succeed by being creative within your limits. Sometimes people are limited by money, by location, by weather, by you name it. I see limitations as a blessing. Once you identify your limitation, you don't have to think about it anymore. Instead of thinking about what you don't have, try asking yourself how you can achieve the desired results with what you do have. When it comes to design, there are no rules. There is, however, such a thing as bad taste. Bad taste on purpose can be a great way to communicate your product, especially if it's a campy satire. But if you've made a gothic horror or character drama, you don't want to have crappy-looking artwork. There is a tendency in the movie business to create key art that looks like the latest hit. There is also a tendency in the movie business to create key art that is totally misleading, just so the company can make a buck when the film is released. My film Firecracker could be cataloged as a gothic horror, although it is far from a horror film. Nevertheless, the distribution company had the idea of marketing it as a horror film with blood dripping off the letters and so forth. That was a horrible idea. I fought them and got them to release the film with the key art I originally designed, which communicated honestly the atmosphere and tone of the film. My Film Casserole Club could be cataloged as a drama or character study. It has some campy moments. It takes place in 1969, so the costumes and art direction lend itself to looking campy, even if the subject matter isn't funny at all. And it might have some sexual situations, but there really isn't anything sexy about it. The distributors for that film wanted to market the film as a sexy and titillating softcore exposé. I thought that would be a horrible mistake because the people expecting to see a sexy and softcore movie would likely be totally disappointed. Why did they want to market it that way? Because sex sells. That's why. My thinking is, if you want me to make and then sell you Babes and Bikini Bingo Summer Camp or Haunted Killer Carnival Part 3, I'm happy to do so, but don't do something dishonest by marketing a movie that isn't the movie. When you design your movie poster, it is important to remember that although different fonts can sometimes look cool, they do not look cool when you place them all together at the same time. I always cringe when I see a design that features more than 2 or 3 different fonts. It's a dead giveaway that the designer just discovered Photoshop when you recognize the urge to use every font they could find. I try to keep fonts simple and usually only use 2. One font is used for the main title, and another for the actors' names, blurbs, and other copy. I try to make sure that the font I use for the main title is not used anywhere else in the design. Using it more than once diminishes the impact of the main title. I usually always find a complementary font to use for everything else. Remember, less is more. With regards to the image or visual art, think about a memorable moment in the film and use it. Before someone sees your movie, they don't know what that image means. But after they see your movie, next time they see the artwork, it'll remind them of your movie. I try to avoid showing something if it's giving too much away. For instance, if your movie is a murder mystery, you probably wouldn't want to reveal the killer on the cover holding a knife, because it would ruin the viewing experience. Maybe, if you wanted to throw off the viewer, you would show each character holding a weapon. Then the viewer won't know who done it. Saul Bass was a great designer of movie posters. You might want to look him up. His designs were far from the traditional key art you see today. In this world of black market punk rock film distribution, key art that is actual artwork might be the perfect idea. The industry's unhealthy obsession with the billing block I may never fully understand. The billing block refers to the collection of names and credits that are positioned at the bottom of movie posters and advertisements. Usually they are comprised on fonts with tall and very narrow vertical lines. So small and tall and narrow that most anyone cannot read them. In fact, it is safe to say that probably no one ever reads them except the people who are included in the billing block. I agree, without the billing block, your movie poster looks unfinished or underdesigned, just like all those laurel wreaths from awards or film festivals. No one stops to read the text inside each laurel wreath. People might see the words official and selection, but hardly anyone can see the tiny words underneath that read Billy Joe's Steakhouse Barbecue Film Festival. It doesn't really matter. Having the ability to put laurel wreaths on your movie poster or in advertisements makes it look to the consumer that your movie is the movie they should see. The billing block has this same worthless effect. To make a billing block, one should start with the name of a production company like Paramount Presents, and then have a little space and follow with a Steve Balderson film or whatever. Then you'll list your top actors who have in their contracts agreed to be in your movie so long as their names appear before the main title on individual title cards. These are moments in the movie when no one else's name appears on the screen at the same time. Following them, you'll type in the title of the movie, and then a short selection of supporting stars, or other actors who have agreed to be in your film so long as they get their own title cards. Following them will be a list of crew people, editor, writers, art direction, the cinematographer, and maybe someone else or a producer, and ending with the director. And repeating the same words that were the start of your billing block. Who reads billing blocks? Who on earth can even see that small? Nobody. Well, nobody except people who have their names in the billing block. God forbid someone who expects their name to be in the billing block can't find their name. Oh, the unjust insanity. Placement is an integral part of the billing block. Some actors specify in their contracts they must have the third placement, or the first, or the second. I've never heard of anyone asking for the fourth onward. Sometimes people will negotiate that they want their name listed first and will gladly take second position, but only if on the same title card as the first person, even if their name will appear second in the billing block. Size of the font is also a big deal. If the star is at a 12-point font size, typically the supporting cast will be at a 10 or a 9 or 8 font size. Usually this is because the main star gets their own title card, whereas the supporting actors are sharing their card with other names, making it so their font size is smaller to keep room for multiple names. There are some actors who specify in their contracts their name must be written in the same font size as the main star. Twice I've made my name, as director, a half font size larger than everyone else's in the credits just to make fun of it all. I'm not one to flatter myself with endless on-screen credits. Even if I did the costumes, makeup, set design, cinematography, writing, and editing, and whatever else, I think it's tacky to make certain everyone else knows it. Usually, I just stick with produced and directed by and leave it at that. There are people out there who do want every credit they can get. That's fine. Might as well give it to them. It'll keep them quiet and you won't have to listen to them. At the end of the day, nobody cares. I mean, right now, think about it. Which name is listed first on the billing block for the Avengers? Which name is listed second on the credits for Star Wars? An excerpt from my book, Filmmaking Confidential. One of my favorite guests from Season 1 is a conversation with Academy Award nominee Sally Kirkland.
My girlfriend had told me, Sally, you're going to have to fuck him. You're going to have to. This is the lead role in The Godfather. And I said, but I've been celibate for however many months I can. I'm celibate. And she said, Sally, this is Francis Ford Coppola. You're going to have to fuck him.
You can hear my full interview with Sally at filmmakingconfidential.com or by subscribing for free to this podcast. Coming up, I'll read another chapter from Filmmaking Confidential right after this. I'm Steve Balderson, and this is the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. I'm back with a special bonus episode reading chapters from my book, Filmmaking Confidential. How to read a screenplay. I never read other people's screenplays unless I understand how to read them. By what perspective to read them. It's a waste of time otherwise. A lot of people read screenplays left and right. but have they ever stopped to think about from what perspective they are reading it? When was the last time you read a screenplay you didn't write? How did you read it? No, not at bedtime or with the lights on. I mean, from what perspective did you read it? Were you looking at it through the gaze of a producer, or a writer, or an actor, or a director, or a composer? Recently, a filmmaker sent me the first 10 pages of a script and asked, "Can you tell me if you think this has potential?" I thought, well, it's impossible to measure the value of a screenplay in the first 10 pages. I might be able to get a sense of the writer's style, their use of vocabulary, whether their dialogue is lyrical or stilted, or even an example of the tone and atmosphere of the story. But feature screenplays are usually around 90 to 100 pages. Judging a screenplay in the first 10 pages is a bit like licking the outside of an apple to determine the taste without biting into it. And people who have tried both Granny Smith and Gala apples can tell you that neither tastes like a Fuji, so licking it just won't cut it. I answered the filmmaker. Before I read it, tell me, what is the perspective I'm reading it from? A director's perspective? A writer's point of view? Or a consultant's? The filmmaker replied, "Great question. Read it first as a director." To clarify further, I asked another question. As if I were directing? Which would mean I would only see if the story was something that spoke to me personally as an artist, and judge the story based on that alone. Or, do you want me to read it from the perspective of you directing? Which means that I would not read it from my perspective, but rather project an outward, external view and imagine this filmmaker's personality, how he sees the world, and does this story seem to align with his sensibilities? Or am I supposed to read it from the standpoint of Ron Howard directing, which means I'd be thinking about it from a totally different place? Would Ron Howard's sensibilities help this story appeal to a broad audience? And would studios find this story appealing financially? The filmmaker answered in a tongue-in-cheek manner, which ended the discussion, but I was totally serious. I decided to not read the 10 pages he sent me. Even if he had sent me the completed screenplay, I wouldn't have read it without understanding from which perspective to read it. If everyone practiced this way of thinking and consciously reading, it would change the industry. It's impossible to adequately judge a movie's potential by the screenplay alone. Screenplays aren't novels, and what's on paper doesn't always translate visually. Film is the director's medium. To judge a movie, one must always take into consideration the visual elements: costumes, hairstyles, makeup, art direction, production design, props, camera work, colors, rhythm, performers, and their acting abilities, and especially music and score. Take this for an example. The Wizard of Oz was gloriously colored and staged, while 1985's Return to Oz was dreadful looking. Never mind the bleak storyline, I'm talking the lack of good design and sleek direction. I imagine the people reading Return to Oz had in their minds the kind of thing that made the first film so cherished, but were devastated upon viewing the end result. There are also brilliantly visualized shows like Broadway's Wicked and the latest film installment, Oz, the Great and Powerful, which looked incredible. It's all about aesthetic understanding and good taste. Part of the director's job is to translate the written word into visual storytelling. A great assignment for a class in film school. Everyone gets the same script, and we'll see what happens when they turn in their projects. One director will take the same story and deliver something totally opposite what another director will do. Yet both films will originate in the same words. Instead of reading screenplays, I ask for either a complete plot or synopsis. Not one meant to lure me into buying the movie, but rather the entire detailed story in just a couple of pages, including spoilers and climax, ending, etc. Usually, if the structure is there and the story is solid, it is possible to make the screenplay great, even if, at that stage, it isn't fleshed out. But if the structure is not solid, the movie won't work. No matter how scenes are rewritten or how dialogue is changed here and there, until that structure is defined and made solid, it just won't work. 8 times out of 10, this is the case with most screenplays. This is why I ask for writers to share with me the structure first. Why should anybody have to waste time reading an entire screenplay only to discover 3 hours later that there is no structure? It's a lot easier and less time-consuming to just read a few paragraphs first. Then, if there is a solid structure, dive into the screenplay and enjoy it. But remember to ask yourselves, from which perspective am I reading this? Am I going to read this as a viewer, a filmmaker, a distribution executive, a marketing executive, an actor, or simply for entertainment? Musicians are famous too. The film business is one of the most illogical businesses in the world. Or rather, the people who operate inside the industry, executives, let's say, make some of the most illogical decisions on a daily basis. I imagine if they were working in any other field of business, they would likely be fired and out of a job pretty quick. And, well, actually, the turnover rate for industry executives is steadily climbing. Remember your contact at that company? Yeah, he only worked there for 6 months and then he was canned. Now he works at that other company. No, wait, that company folded. I heard he's working as a producer's rep now. Anyway, when I'm casting a movie, I've found that sometimes it makes more sense to cast famous musicians in roles instead of famous actors. Famous musicians have global followings and fans who buy whatever they churn out. I figure tapping into that marketplace makes sense if my purpose is to have exposure and sales, to get the movies I make out there and seen by an audience. I do not make movies so they can sit on the shelves in a dark closet. Did you know that a musician can have as many, and in some cases even more, fans than a famous actor? Famous actors are familiar with being in movies. When I'm putting together a guerrilla-style shoot, the chances of attracting someone like George Clooney to that project is pretty slim. On the other hand, famous musicians aren't approached to be in movies very often, so for them, it's a fun adventure. Danny DeVito can attest that Mike Patton has as many fans as he does. Ask him. However, most industry executives do not know who Mike Patton is. And those who do know probably don't think he has a fan base as big or larger than Danny DeVito. So when you have a film starring Mike Patton, industry executives will not be as interested as they would if your project starred Danny DeVito. I learned that lesson when peddling my film Firecracker. I was just stunned by the film industry's total disregard for famous musicians. I was reminded by this again while peddling my film The Casserole Club, which stars Backstreet Boy Kevin Richardson in his film acting debut. The Backstreet Boys are the best-selling boy band of all time. They've sold over 100 million albums. They have a global following that is larger than that of Mike Patton, which means Kevin Richardson has more fans than Danny DeVito and Mike Patton combined. That kind of following is the equivalent of having someone like George Clooney in my movie. The tens of millions of Backstreet Boy fans spend money to buy a movie just as easily as they do music. Yet most film businesses cannot wrap their heads around this idea. But that's okay. You don't particularly need anyone in the film business to help you market directly to a musician's fan base. You can do it on your own. Filmmakers, think about why you're making a movie. Do you want people to see it? Are you only interested in working with famous actors? Have you thought about casting a famous musician? Did you know that there are famous musicians you've never heard of who have more fans than Brad Pitt? Maybe one day the film industry will recognize the music industry exists and take advantage of cross-market promotion. But until they figure it out, my advice is to take advantage of it and be thankful they aren't so you can reap the rewards. Going back to my earlier point about the Holly apple turnovers, I don't mean traditional apple turnovers, which are tender and flaky, with apple pie-like filling and a thin white glaze, nor am I speaking about Gwyneth's daughter. I'm speaking about the kinds that are just a bit flaky and work as executives at movie studios and production companies in Hollywood. When I began my film career in the 1990s, I met a slew of awesome people who had great jobs with all the major studios. After now disgraced, producer Harvey Weinstein called me personally to express his interest in acquiring my film Pep Squad, I became friends with his assistant, or rather his assistant du jour. That person was quickly replaced by another assistant who, shortly after being hired, developed a crush on me. It was kind of bizarre. Of course, I never met the guy in real life, but to be funny, I sent him an 8x10 glossy headshot of my face as a joke. He hung it up on the wall by his desk, and each time I called to visit with Harvey, the assistant thought I was calling to visit with him, not Harvey. It all became very confusing. But just as soon as he was developing some long-distance feelings for me, he was axed as well. So in came another assistant. By that point, I'd sold my movie to another distributor, so I stopped calling. I'm not sure who his next assistant was. Probably someone who enabled Harvey's now-known infamous and repulsive behavior. My mentor Eric Sherman always suggested it was a really good idea to network and make friends with executives at certain companies because at some point, they might be able to help me get a movie made, or whatever. Besides the aforementioned assistant, I met some great people who were VPs of production, directors of acquisitions, and other higher-ups that one would think would be relatively great connections. One incredible woman, Sarah Rose, was an inspiration to me. After seeing my film at the Cannes Film Market, she came up to me afterwards to introduce herself. She told me to stop by and see her at MGM any time I was in LA, and I did. She always took my meetings and was always a delight to visit with. She then became Senior VP of Production at MGM UA, and we spoke many times about making my film Firecracker together. That didn't happen, but we kept in touch, and I always looked forward to working with her in the future. While I was on track to develop these relationships, some of the people were awesome, like Sarah Rose, but some of the other ones were the flaky kind and not so cool. A strange thing kept happening. They kept losing their jobs. Some executives moved to other companies on their own free will. Some were moved into different jobs within the same company, but not a job that had anything to do with why I was talking to them. And then there were some who were fired and never seen or heard from again. After several years, it became clear to me that most movie executives can't keep a job for more than about 2 years. This turnover syndrome is a bizarre fact about the movie business. Even Penny Marshall mentioned this phenomenon in her memoir. If there is someone working with you on your movie when you start the process, they won't be working at the studio when you finish the movie. Just as simple as that. My question is why? Why can't most movie executives keep a job for more than a couple years? Waiting to work. If you are serious about wanting to get your film actually made, you should avoid Hollywood altogether. Trust me. No one but the majors makes movies in Hollywood. The players you would think would be the most involved are precisely the individuals least interested in the activity. What? How can you say that? Well, because it's true. People go to Hollywood to be in a continuous state of development. Why? Because they are lazy. They do not want to work. They do not want to be productive. They want to stay in bed or lounge about the fucking pool sipping martinis. No one in Hollywood will return your calls because there's just no time. They will tell you they're so swamped. People in the movie business are so busy. Try so busy scheduling their August holiday. Think you can call back in September? Guess again. From September to November, people in the movie business can't manage a conversation because all capable speaking skills are being sucked up by Toronto and the other fall film festivals. No one works in December, regardless of religion, and when they return after the new year, all available time is spent obsessing over Sundance. And of course, February is out of the question because everyone is obsessed with what happened or didn't happen at Sundance. April through May is lost to Cannes. This leaves only March and a slim chance to reach anyone during hiatus, June or July, unless you've got Spider-Man 7 in the works, or the latest special effects show. The only real chance you've got is to make your film on your own. Think you want to involve the industry? Heed this warning. There's nothing wrong with enjoying time off from time to time, but must we remain off so much of the time? And what are people doing in their time off? Playing video games, chatting with online strangers, playing golf, attempting yoga, gorging on wine and cheese? Whatever happened to productivity? Come to think of it, maybe Hollywood isn't the only place contaminated with laziness. There are 365 days in a calendar year. 104 of them are wasted by people not working on the weekends. That only leaves 261 days to get any work done. Think it stops there? Guess again. We can't forget the holidays. FYI, the movie industry observes every holiday known to man, and not just the major ones. I used to think they did this to avoid offending any major cultural or religious group, but it seems to me that most everyone in the U.S. does it as well, even people who are deliberately offensive on a daily basis, and clearly cannot be attempting to avoid offending someone. We have Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Lincoln's birthday, Washington's birthday, Good Friday, Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, Labor Day. By all means, a special day to deliberately not work. Columbus Day, Election Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and those are just the bank holidays. We can't forget Chinese New Year, Groundhog Day, Valentine's Day, Ash Wednesday, Purim, St. Patrick's Day, April Fools, Passover, Easter, Tax Day, Kwanzaa, Nurses Day, Mother's Day, Armed Forces Day, Father's Day, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Halloween, All Saints Day, Hanukkah, Ramadan, and of course, Cinco de Mayo. I found the following on the website for the Pennsylvania Department of Banking. When a fixed holiday falls on a Sunday, it shall be observed on the following Monday. When it falls on a Saturday, it may be observed on the following Monday. Independence Day, July 4th, will fall on a Sunday and therefore must be observed on Monday, July 5th. Christmas Day, December 25th, will fall on a Saturday and therefore may be observed on Monday, December 27th. Are they kidding? No. We wouldn't want to overlap a weekend with a holiday for a chance at yet another day off. By the time New Year's Eve rolls around, people take yet another 2 days off. Yes, 2 whole days. No one should have to work with a hangover. And I've never understood why people celebrate the coming of a new year. Are they excited yet another year has passed? Are they thrilled at the notion that in the coming year they only have 24 days to work? Or are they thrilled at the idea that 341 days will be spent not doing any? On my street, there isn't a reason to take a vacation. We don't need a break from our lives. We need no escape. We happen to enjoy what we're doing. That's a rare thing these days, actually having enjoyment at your place of work. I used to get really frustrated. It seemed that every time I turned around, people were finding any excuse possible to avoid doing any work. Now, I see it as a gift. While millions are sitting around by the pool, playing golf, taking a holiday, the rest of us can get the upper hand. My advice is to encourage other people to take even more time off from work. This way, you will be able to accomplish more while they're gone. And if you are efficient, you might even reach your desired results before anyone else gets back. If, on the notion, you dislike your life and don't really want to do any work, I suggest moving to Los Angeles and getting a job in the movie industry. If the move seems daunting, taking any job seems to do the trick regardless of the location. Don't worry. You're sure to find a place where you don't have to do anything. Tune in next time for more Filmmaking Confidential. It is totally free to subscribe, and when you subscribe, you'll get upcoming new episodes automatically, and you'll have free access to all our past shows. Please leave a review to let us know how we're doing. The Filmmaking Confidential podcast is a production of Dakanga Audio and produced by myself and Ella Spencer. Our theme music is composed by Kevin Robles. For more of the Filmmaking Confidential podcast, head over to filmmakingconfidential.com. While you wait for Season 2, have a listen to some of the episodes from Season 1. The stories shared by each guest are often funny, honest, candid, and extremely inspiring. Production of Season 2 is in the works. To learn more of my filmmaking secrets, be sure to pick up a copy of the book, Filmmaking Confidential, available on Audible, paperback, and ebook, wherever books are sold. I'm Steve Balderson. Thanks for listening and spreading the word. Until next time, keep making, keep doing, keep going.